World War I, the Great War and its human cost. World War I, fought from 1914 to 1918, stands as one of the deadliest and most transformative events in human history. Although remembered for its military strategies, political consequences, and massive geopolitical realignments, it is equally important to understand the profound human tragedy that unfolded behind the lines and within the trenches. The war reshaped nations, destroyed empires, introduced new forms of industrialized killing, and left millions of people physically and emotionally scarred. It remains a pivotal moment in global history, not only because of its political stakes, but because of the ordinary human lives caught in its devastation. Origins of the conflict. The origins of World War I are rooted in decades of tension among European powers, fueled by nationalism, imperial competition, and complex alliances. The immediate spark occurred on June 28, 1914, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated in Sarajevo. His death set off a rapid chain reaction. Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia, and when diplomatic negotiations failed, both nations mobilized for war. Soon afterward, the greater network of alliances came into play. Germany backed Austria-Hungary, while Russia supported Serbia. As Russia mobilized, Germany declared war on Russia and its ally France. When German forces violated Belgian neutrality to execute the Schlieffen Plan, Britain entered the war to defend Belgium and counter German expansion. What began as a regional conflict spiraled almost immediately into a full-scale continental war. The political and military alliances. Two opposing power blocks formed. On one side were the Allied powers, led by France, Britain, Russia, and later United States, Italy, and numerous other nations. On the other side stood the Central Powers Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. These alliances created an environment in which any local dispute risked escalating into a global catastrophe. Diplomacy became nearly impossible once mobilization orders were placed, as leaders believed that delaying military action could result in strategic disadvantage. The war revealed not only the fragility of this balance of power, but also how deeply nationalism influenced political decisions. Many countries believed the conflict would be brief, over by Christmas, as some leaders proclaimed. Instead, it became a prolonged, grinding war of attrition that devastated entire landscapes and societies, The Western Front, trench warfare, and stalemate, the most iconic and horrific aspect of World War I was the trench warfare that dominated the Western Front. After the German advance into France was halted at the First Battle of the Marne in 1914. Both sides dug defensive lines from the North Sea to the Swiss border. These trenches became semi-permanent homes for millions of soldiers. Life in the trenches was nightmarish. Soldiers lived in narrow earthen ditches, often filled with mud, sometimes waist-deep after rainfall. Sanitation was extremely poor. Rats infested the trenches, feeding on corpses that could not be retrieved from no man's land. Lice were a constant torment, and trench foot, a painful and potentially deadly condition caused by prolonged exposure to wet, unsanitary conditions, was widespread. Worse than the physical discomfort was the constant threat of sudden death. Artillery bombardments shook the ground day and night. Machine gun fire made any movement above the trench lip risky. Poison gas, introduced on the Western Front in 1915, added a new layer of terror. Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas burned lungs, eyes, and skin, leaving many soldiers permanently scarred or blind. Between the opposing trenches lay no man's land, a barren, shell-torn stretch of land littered with debris and corpses. Any attempt to cross it during an attack was brutally costly. Soldiers charged through mud and barbed wire under machine gun fire, often gaining only a few yards at the price of thousands of lives. The result was a grim stalemate that persisted for years, with neither side able to achieve decisive breakthroughs despite massive offensives. Industrialized warfare and new technology. World War I marked a turning point in military technology. Many weapons that had been invented or improved in the years before the war reached their full destructive potential during the conflict. Machine guns became central tools of defense, capable of mowing down waves of infantry in seconds. Artillery grew more powerful and more accurate, and counter-battery fire allowed armies to attack enemy guns as well as troops. Poison gas represented one of the most feared innovations. It caused painful and lingering deaths, even when exposure was limited. Gas masks eventually became standard equipment, but the terror they inspired never faded. The war also saw the first large-scale use of tanks. Though initially slow and unreliable, tanks provided protection from small arms fire and could crush barbed wire, helping to break through enemy trenches. Airplanes, once mere reconnaissance tools, evolved into weapons capable of bombing and aerial combat. The fighter aces of World War I became legends, although their battles represented only a tiny fraction of the war's human toll. All of these technologies combined to create a conflict unlike anything the world had seen. Killing became mechanized, impersonal, and carried out on a scale that shocked even the most hardened military leaders. The Eastern Front and global scope. While the Western Front is the most famous front of World War I, the Eastern Front played a crucial role in shaping the outcome of the war. Battles there spanned vast distances across Eastern Europe, and unlike the stalemate in the West, the Eastern Front saw large movements of armies. Russia struggled with inadequate supply lines, limited industrial output, and internal political unrest. Major defeats, such as those at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes, weakened Russian morale and accelerated the collapse of the Russian Empire. By 1917, revolution erupted in Russia. The abdication of Tsar Nicholas II, followed by the Bolshevik Revolution, led to Russia's withdrawal from the war after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. This allowed Germany to shift forces westward, hoping to achieve victory before the United States could deploy significant numbers of troops. Beyond Europe, the war stretched into Africa, the Middle East, and the Pacific. Colonial troops from Asia and Africa served alongside European soldiers, demonstrating the truly global nature of the conflict. The Ottoman Empire fought major campaigns against British forces in modern-day Iraq, Israel, and Turkey. In many regions, the war became intertwined with struggles for independence and national identity. The United States enters the war. For the first few years, the United States maintained a policy of neutrality. Many Americans were reluctant to become involved in a European conflict. However, a series of events gradually shifted public opinion. German submarine warfare, particularly the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, angered many Americans. The interception of the Zimmermann telegram, Germany's attempt to persuade Mexico to attack the United States, further increased tensions. When the United States finally declared war on Germany in April 1917, its entry provided the Allies with fresh troops, industrial resources, and financial support. American soldiers, known as the American Expeditionary Forces, helped turn the tide on the Western Front. Their arrival boosted Allied morale and contributed to the series of offensives that eventually broke German defenses in 1918. The war's final stages. By late 1918, the Central Powers were exhausted. The Allied forces, reinforced by the United States, launched a series of successful offensives known as the 100 Days Offensive. German lines collapsed, and internal political turmoil grew within Germany. Facing invasion and starvation caused by Allied blockades, the German leadership agreed to an armistice on November 11, 1918. Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire disintegrated under the strain of war and internal nationalist movements. Bulgaria also surrendered. The armistice did not formally end the war that came with peace treaties, most notably the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, but the fighting had stopped. Human cost and psychological trauma. The human cost of World War I was unimaginable. More than 10 million soldiers died, and millions more were wounded. Civilian casualties were also high due to food shortages, disease, and the destruction caused by military operations. Entire towns lost most of their young men, leaving deep social and demographic scars. The psychological trauma was equally devastating. Many soldiers suffered from shell shock, a condition we now understand as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. At the time, however, mental health was poorly understood. Soldiers suffering from shell shock were often misunderstood, mistreated, or accused of cowardice. The war forced society to confront the reality of psychological injury on a massive scale. Letters, diaries, and memoirs from soldiers revealed the emotional strain of life on the front. Many described nightmares, anxiety, and a sense of detachment that persisted long after the war ended. The psychological wounds of World War I influenced art, literature, and philosophy for decades, contributing to a broader cultural shift towards skepticism about war and authority. Social and political aftermath. The war brought enormous political changes. 4 major empires collapsed: the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire. New nations emerged across Europe and the Middle East, many of them created through hastily drawn borders that ignored ethnic and cultural realities. The Treaty of Versailles imposed harsh penalties on Germany, including territorial losses, military restrictions, and large financial reparations. These terms created deep resentment in Germany and contributed to the conditions that allowed extremist ideologies, most notably Nazis, to rise in the following decades. In this sense, World War I directly paved the way for World War II. In the Middle East, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the secret agreements made by European powers led to a new geopolitical order, the effects of which are still felt today. The war also stimulated independence movements in colonized nations, planting the seeds for decolonization in the mid-20th century. A war that changed the world. World War I transformed global politics, society, and culture. It introduced new forms of military technology, demonstrated the destructive potential of industrialized warfare, and revealed the fragility of political alliances. It also left a deep mark on human consciousness. The horror experienced by soldiers and civilians alike led many to question the romanticized view of war that had dominated European culture for centuries. The conflict also produced significant advances in medicine and technology. Surgeons developed new techniques to treat wounds, reconstruct faces, and prevent infections. The widespread use of ambulances, X-rays, and antiseptics saved countless lives. Innovations such as tanks, aircraft, and wireless communication permanently altered the nature of warfare. Yet despite these advancements, the overwhelming legacy of World War I remains the human suffering it caused. The millions who died, the families torn apart, and the emotional trauma carried by survivors all testify to the tragic cost of global conflict. Conclusion. World War I stands as a defining moment in modern history. It was not simply a conflict between nations, but a profound human tragedy that reshaped the world. From the muddy trenches of the Western Front to the sweeping battles of the Eastern Front, the war left behind a legacy of loss, destruction, and transformation. Understanding World War I requires more than studying treaties and battles. It demands recognizing the experiences of the ordinary men and women who lived through it. The war altered the course of the 20th century, shattered empires, and left scars both visible and invisible that lasted for generations. Its lessons remind us of the fragile nature of peace and the immense cost of conflict. Even today, more than a century later, World War I continues to shape our understanding of war, humanity, and the responsibilities that come with power and leadership.